Before we started collaborating, we in the sense, the as followers of the old kind of thing. So before we started collaborating in the art schools, these two areas sometimes existed side by side, but without any conversation between. So most of the colonial art schools had craft sections. But the people who went to study there were people who came from traditional craftsmen's family, and the art school people were mixed lot. And the activities of these two sections remained totally separate. What happened in Kalabon was that these two sections were not separate. And we didn't have any sections really, basically. I think it was a very interesting experiment in art education, that when you came and became a student in Kalabon, we didn't have any exercises which the students went. In the early years, so in the okay. So in the early years, what happened was that normally in an art school, you began with certain exercises which introduced to certain skills and allowed you to acquire those skills. But in the case of Kalabon, the approach that Nandalal took was not to have such early classes in it. So if you look at the way that they said, the first announcement we have of Kalabon says it teaches Angan and Kalpana. So these are the two things. So one may say that one is a representation, the other is visualization in a broad way. Because Kalpana is not necessarily imagination in this context. So what one started with was actually your own work. And then the teachers, at that time initially Nandalal mainly, would observe you and see what directions your talent took. That really led you to acquire the kind of skills. The teachers would then help the student to acquire the skills he or she needs to cultivate the skills or innate talents that this particular person had. So without any division between crafts and arts, some of them became designers, craftsmen, others became painters, sculptors. So basically the same program, without any division, produced different kinds of people. So that was Kalabon. And the goals of Kalabon were very different from that of Srinagar. When Srinagar happened, the idea was to augment the earnings, the kind of earnings of the peasants or the agriculturalists. So add to the agricultural practice. There were two kinds of training even in Srinagar. One was what went on in the schools. So the children would have to learn, besides basic education, some kind of craft. Now, and when they learned that craft, it was not just producing with their hands. It was also to understand the the kind of way how the history of the craft, the materials, where did they come from, the regions where, from where these, materials came, and the marketing and so on and so forth. So the idea was that these children who are trained in the school will then become agents who will of training and empowering the villagers who want to practice craft. So that was one thing. The other was to bring in villagers and train them in specific crafts. They didn't go through this history, the materials, where do you get things from and that kind of stuff. But they were trained to handle certain materials, learn certain crafts, and use that to produce objects which would be of use to themselves. And gradually, by about 1930, which can be marketed. So that was the difference between these two. And from these, you can think about all the other differences that.
Right. Thank you. Shivda has referred to my book, so I see that it's licensed to talk about it. When I was doing the research, of course, there is Kala Bhavan, and in the course of looking at Kala Bhavan, of course, one of the first things that strikes you is the public projects that they are doing. For example, the murals, right? So there is an account of how the first mural, which they undertook. It's the Pacha Bhavan mural project. So they needed an expert in the field, and the person they called was not, within quotes, the artist. Right, to somebody who's skilled in the craft of doing this work that they were used to are not necessarily the only ways in which artisans work, and it was also something that they were learning. So I found that one of the instances which is very interesting in the sense, first of course, that almost all of these were not the individuals' work. There would be Master Moshe and there would be other sort of senior students, but there were also activities which were in a workshop studio mode, where everybody, or not maybe everybody, but groups of students participated, which of course, dovetails into what you were saying about how the Kala Bhavan experiment, or visual arts and the plastic arts in Kala Bhavan, was so different from the government art schools or other colonial experiment or colonial sort of setups that you have. So I think something really interesting is happening, which of course, as you said, this hierarchy is getting challenged. And would you say that you did mention this, but would you talk a little about Nandalal's own practices, for example, of making the brush or making paint from locally available material? Would you say that this is also, in a certain sense, breaking away from this understanding of what the artist does? In other words, stands in front of a canvas and uses ready-made material and does a representation. So you have the artist involved in this entire process of making of a work of art, also which involves manual labor in the sense of the making of the material.
The Nandalal was more responsive to certain things than his contemporaries. Like, for instance, his teacher, Abanindranath, had no interest in public art. Although Havel, who he calls his guru, wanted mural painting and other public art. And he did bring a traditional craftsman or muralist from Jaipur to the art college in Calcutta. Abanindranath never tried. He did 2 little small pieces of thing, and after that he did. But Nandalal took an interest in the murals. So the first thing is he's going to copy that in the murals. But also when he came to Shantiniketan, and this is something that Rabindranath really plays a role. He wanted art to leave the studios and enter the community spaces. So that is where he finds mural painting as a possibility. Actually, the first mural was done by a couple of Kalabond students, including Binod Bihari, Santoshalai, because the teachers themselves had gone to copy the bark murals in 1921, and they were sending little, postcards showing these bark murals, drawing them, talking about it, and also making the tracings and posting it back to Shantiniketan. So this inspired the students to try something in the walls. It doesn't exist anymore. And the mural that we see in Vadamon, that's the second one, which when Nandalal returns, he, along with Binod Bihari and his daughter, paints during the summer vacation. And then comes the traditional muralist from Jaipur. Because one of the things that Nandalal, unlike Abanindranath didn't believe in the kind of art education kind of thing. He said that you are an artist or you are not an artist. So if you are an artist, you can learn whatever you need to learn within 6 months. So that was his attitude to art education. But Nandalal had a different thing. He thought that we have lost touch with a lot of traditional practices, and these need to be revived, these need to be brought back. So the only way to bring it back was to go to these people. So he went, not only brought people here, occasionally went to people to study, like Tibetan Tanga and so on, how to paint. So he got these people who were not artists in the contemporary terms, but who were artists in their own ways, to come and teach these techniques in Kalaband. So that's how Narsingh Lal, he comes. So initially, of course, as you said, that even he didn't know that Nandalal was the teacher at the other. So he was learning from him exactly like all the other students. So what you have mentioned in your book, that did take place, but it's also part of a larger project to get people and to recover these areas of knowledge back. So if you look at Nandalal's writing, one of his books is completely based on all these different techniques that he learned, and then put all the notes together with little diagrams and little things. And the other thing about this material is, as a sensitive artist, Nandalal realized that your materials are part of your language. Like even your brush, you can't paint all kinds of paintings with the same brush. Now, the famous Japanese brush, you can't do a miniature, impossible. It's only good for calligraphic work and nothing else. And if you want to paint a miniature, you have to make a brush like the traditional Indian miniature painter, which had very few bristles, but it would be stiff. It would carry a lot of material like the Japanese, but only with that kind of a brush can you make those fine stippling. Now, similarly with colors. All kinds of colors are not really good for all kinds of work. So you have to really produce it. So your materials, your ground, all that is part of your image. That is where you think. Even the way, if you look at this book, you will see that even how you sit to paint in each kind of work is different. So, like when you are doing a miniature painting, that only your fingers move, nothing beyond your wrist moves. But when you are doing an ink painting, your whole hand moves. So that also means how do you sit. So everything becomes part of the material, your body, everything contributes to the final image and the quality of the final image. So Nandalal was extremely sensitive to this. So he wanted to also teach this to his students. So that is why probably he did all these experiments, went around, learned these different things from different places, introduced that, including the making of material. But there was also in that context a certain significance to being able to work with all kinds of materials. Because this is a story that a later Indian painter told me, Vishwanathan, who went to Paris and made a name for himself. So he said when he was out of school and he decided to go to Madras and study painting. Before that he went to a sort of busy local artist in Kerala who was working in the tradition of revival. And he was somebody who got a lot of commissions, portraits and things like that. But when he went, this guy was sitting idle, I mean, not doing anything. So he asked why. He said, no, I've ordered for these canvases. And of course in Kerala, the canvas has to come, I mean, Ibsen and Newton, things from England to Bombay, and Wakils and Sons would then send it to Kerala. And so brush, paint, everything you have to wait till it arrives from Kerala. Amarendra Nath, did that. I mean, all his paper, all his colors, all his brushes came from England. He didn't use, this great master of revival of Indian painting never used Indian materials. And which Nandalal did quite a bit. So it was also, I thought this whole idea, look at this image of an artist who has a lot of work to do, but can't do because things have to arrive from somewhere. So I think Nandalal's part of the thing, because of his Gandhian background, was also to ensure that you can make art. You don't need things. The most normal, locally available, the simplest materials are good enough to make things.
I think the best instance of that, of course, as many of you know, is the Gandhi Nandalal sort of working together for the Congress sessions at various places, of which the Haripura panels are most well known. And Nandalal also used absolutely locally available material to create these sort of, almost magical townships. And Gandhi's instruction was that the people who are coming for this are ordinary people, and they should not feel alienated once they enter. It's not an exhibition space that they're entering. It's a space which they will identify as their own and will be able to relate to what they're doing. I think that's the first, a very important lesson in terms of, art as not being what we would say high culture, within quotes once again, and craft is popular culture, but art and the role of the artist and that of the artisan sort of mingles in very interesting ways, because Nandalal is also a person who can break away from many of these traditional understandings of both the artist and the artisan, I would say. But coming to Sriniketan, it seems to me, in the course of the work that I did, that it emerged that the two people who were central in many ways to the making of Sriniketan in particular, and also Shantiniketan, as a place for craft, once again I'm using this word within quotes, is our Rothindranath Thakur and his wife, Pratima Devi. And this was something, and Andre Karpele, who was part of this project also together. So I think this is interesting because one of the first things which, and of course that Rothindranath is trained as a scientist, agricultural scientist, but his real passion is in art, in not his Baba Moshe's kind of art, but a different kind of art, which is also wood carving, woodwork, and leather. Both of these, leather work, wood carving, and Rabindranath has of course been instrumental in bringing the batik to Shantiniketan from Java. And I recently learned about Walter Spies, who came from Java, from a novel by Anuradha Roy, Lives That We Never Lived. I didn't write about Walter Spies because I didn't find him anywhere in the documents. So there were people who were coming in, foreigners as it were, who were coming in, and also people going from here to learn what would be traditional kind of art craft from Southeast Asia, what we call Southeast Asia. So influences from outside of India meant not Europe in this particular case, but also primarily China, Japan, Indonesia, Java. Indonesia in particular, not just the batik, but other forms in the Shongit problem, as we know. So Rothindranath and Pratima Devi play a very crucial role in the setting up of this, and it's of course it's called Bichitra. This sort of initial craft guild is called Bichitra. Rabindranath loves the word Bichitra. The Jodashako experiment is also called Bichitra. Bichitra, I think, because many forms. It means something which is many formed in that sense. So pottery, leather work, weaving, these become the mainstay of Sriniketan, and in my readings I found that they do such good work, especially pottery, that during the time of the Second World War, which is like a crisis everywhere, Vishwabharati is opening a new sort of sales counter in near Esplanade. So they're saying that we're making good money. So they're making good money in the time of the war, right? So these are fascinating accounts that you get if you're looking at any of these official documents. And this whole idea of the guild, I think, in a sense of people working together, as you said, they are bringing in people in the villages, from the villages, giving them a certain kind of training, learning also of the traditional form or traditional kind of ways of working, but also improvising on those, and evolving, I would say, a kind of very mixed sort of system of doing what is called producing objects of art, and also with an eye to the market.
In fact, I mean, if I go back a little bit to the differences I talked about, while there was a lot of overlap, because when Vichitra is kind of thing, initially it is also described as the new department of Kalam. So at that point there was, the activities in Sriniketan had it. So the idea was, of course, to bring crafts and the students would learn, and this was in 1921, by 22, 23 of 22, beginning of 23, you see that the way the Kalabam course is announced changes.
Yes.
Yeah, that adds all these crafts. So the Vijitra kind of closes down, but they become, all those things they did there becomes part of the Kalabam. And Nandlal's interest in the craft was twofold. Not only to produce craft objects, but to make artists, craftsmen, artists, designers, people who would be more versatile in a way. So the idea of teaching crafts in kind of thing was to empower artists much more. Of course, there was also a little bit of that in case you need to depend on crafts to survive. Karu Sangha came out of that.
I would want you to talk a little about Karu Sangha.
So that was one of the parts. But if you look at all the people who came out of it, they would be great artists and also extremely good designers and so on and so forth. But throughout Sriniketan, what happened was that most of the people who worked there specialized in one craft. Nobody did multiple things. So somebody was weaving, somebody was doing pottery, somebody else was doing leather work and so on. But it had a certain dimension which is very important. So, and very often it is artists from Kalabhavan who provided the designs. So it was in a sense a center of mass production. Taken these two things taken together, it had a larger pattern. That in a sense, Shantiniketan was producing a new aesthetics and spreading that aesthetics in the middle class, and Sriniketan was then mass producing it using village craftsmen and newly trained people in the village to cater to that market. So there were these two things, they're complementary, but they functioned very differently. In one place you are producing artists who are multifaceted, and the other area you are producing specialist craftsmen who do a certain kind of thing but mass produce. And this is also a very important thing, because very often Kalavan is compared with Bauhaus, where the whole relation with was industrial production. In India, because we didn't have that kind of industries, and so what Kalavan did in a sense was use the vast repertoire of craftsmen and that craft tradition to mass produce things. So it was the market was actually kind of fed by Sriniketan, but the aesthetics was created in Kalavan. So it was a combined kind of a thing. So you have, on the one hand, artists who are more versatile, who actually move from art to craft and back and on that. And the other hand, you had specialized craftsmen producing individual kind of objects. So this is a kind of thing. And in fact, in 1933, it starts this whole idea of selling. Even before that, when Vijitra was there, they had a couple of exhibitions in Calcutta, along with art objects, including the murals that were copied by these artists in Bagh. They were exhibited, and some of these objects were sold. So that's where Artisan comes in, that you could exploit this possibility that artists, after they leave Kalavan, they can probably survive, selling some of the craft objects. But what people like Nandalal and others did in a sense was to this idea of producing individual exclusive craft objects, personalized craft objects. Whereas in Sriniketan, it was the non-exclusive mass-produced objects. And so there's a standardization thing that comes. And that standardization actually becomes much more emphasized in the late 30s, it was from 38, 40, that's a period.
And they're selling.
Yeah. So the standardization comes because if you want to cater to a market, there should be a certain standardization.
Thank you, Shivda, for pointing this out. I think this is a very important distinction. It occurred to me and I don't write about it at all. But the kind of nature of the relationship between
non-traditional, non-caste practitioners, much more, maybe more than 3 or 4 times. It was only in weaving. Even weaving there was, but it was still the larger number was traditional weavers. So you could bring that class and caste structure in the production of handicrafts. That was broken, and that was a very important thing. And the crafts did play a role. We'll have to think about the total social change that Sriniketan wanted to bring, and that was where it was very important. Because people who did, maybe they slightly exaggerated the numbers, but by about 1950, the villages where Sriniketan worked, where its activities were there, their earnings were more than twice that of the other villages around. And they say the number of school-going children was 100%, which I'm not very sure, but it is substantially higher. So there were a lot of social changes that was happening to break that. Indian crafts was organized along caste, kind of divisions, which is something that Sriniketan actually breaks, which is a very
major
important
thing.
Yeah, major thing. So both these places had different things. And Kalavan also encouraged the production of non-professional art, which Nandalal thought is the best way to get people to appreciate arts. So the Harusango even later, where you get women from the community to come and do things. So part of that was also to encourage people who are not artists I mean, to do arts at a amateur level, and that really helps the appreciation and the spread of the arts. So that was also an important thing. And one last thing which you said about this stylistic factors, about the Alpana and all that. Now, really that, to a certain extent, the interest that Nandalal took in Ajanta, which Abhinandanath didn't take again. So the source for a lot of decorative arts in Shantiniketan was Ajanta. So that is from where you get this kind of Alpana, which Rhythm Majumdar is reacting to.
Yes.
But if you look at Sriniketan, right from the beginning, Sriniketan, the designs would be different. That they were willing to learn from across the world. There was the Swedish weavers who came.
Yes.
They also didn't think so much of hand production actually, especially in weaving, because they moved to semi-automatic Japanese, looms. So they were also sending people to different places to study. And even the woodcraft in some sense, they were greatly influenced by the Lloyd system.
Yes.
So all this, they were taking elements from all across. And if you look at the garis and all that they produce, they're probably drawing from, Latin American textiles and so on. So they were taking motifs, things from there, and many of the textiles obviously have a little more of the geometric than the, except for the batiks, which are hand-drawn things. But if you're weaving, that automatically,
weaving, yes,
yeah.
yes.
So anything that is produced on the loom would actually move a little bit more in that direction, kind of thing. So even in terms of styles, there was a big difference between these two productions. There are parallels, there are some linkages, but you can also notice a kind of shift in difference.
Yes, thank you very much, Shita, for pointing these out. And there is information by way of Shivaratri News, which talks constantly about weaving, the experiments in weaving, about the Swedish weavers coming, one of them coming in by ship and almost getting shipwrecked. So there are very interesting accounts, very adventurous people who actually came to Shantiniketan and Sriniketan. And there is the Manipuri loom, which is given also specially, brought in also specially for women, so that they are smaller and therefore more easy to handle. Before it becomes semi sort of powered looms, big sort of stuff, they're working choto, they're working in small amounts, I think.
Yeah, certain kind of materials, especially if it's not too wide,
Yes.
then these looms are very good. And part of the thing is that they don't need, there's no furniture as such for these looms. You can fold them up, roll them up, take them home, whatever. It's very transportable. So that was the thing. So that became a kind of thing. So these looms continued, and they made small looms which they called hobby looms, which were also then produced. So there was a lot of these works happening. But you can do certain kind of weaving on those looms, but you can't do certain others. So they had their own. So when you are doing smaller things, like when you do a bag, you don't need a big loom.
No,
you need only this small.
But choto shawl, if you do a shawl kind of
even
thing.
that can be done on what we call like Manipuri loom, and which can be easily folded up and things like that. So when they produce such things, they use these things, which also is very good because we were training village women to do that.
In particular, yes.
And so they can don't need to have a workshop. One, a space for the loom. They can always
Work
use
from home?
and also they can use a space. The veranda of the house can become a space for the temporary loom and so on. So it was also easier for them to do these things. So there were also then, you see in Sriniketan, they were training people on the one hand, and then these people worked from home, and it was marketed by Sriniketan, and they had a rate piece kind of agreement with them. So that's how they worked.
And it did rather well.
Yeah, the designs were given, and then these people produced those objects, then they brought it, and Sriniketan then took it, and it was not only in Calcutta. They had actually, after Calcutta, they tied up with Bombay. The Nagpur Darjeeling, so they had, I mean, people, maybe other shops, agencies, and even Delhi. So different places where they had these outlets. The one in Calcutta that was done by Vishwabharati itself,
Yes,
but
yes.
in other places they tied up with other agencies.
Yes, thank you, Shivda, for sort of pointing out about other places. I've looked narrowly at what is available by way of documents here. So so I think, therefore, several things have emerged in the course of this very interesting and informative and also analysis which Shivda has been doing. One, I think, is the question of class caste nature of crafts, which is also changing, which is, I think, very, very significant. It's happening in Sriniketan largely. The fact that Kala Bhavan retains this idea of the individual and therefore also the possibility of experimenting, because they don't have to mass produce. So though they are not averse to this idea of reaching out to the larger public. I mean, Nandal's one of the major sort of attempts is to reach out and create a taste in the Kindiki, if there is not a taste which is produced. The other thing which I just wanted to, which occurred to me, is that Sriniketan is set up as a Shamobai, primarily as a cooperative. So there is a health cooperative, there is a cooperative for crafts. There is agriculture is also, it's organized in terms of cluster of villages. But interestingly, it's not so much agriculture, but the craft which actually takes off in a major way. About agriculture, there is a lot of skepticism. There is some resistance. Sudhir Babu talks about how in Sriniketan the experiments often seemed too exotic to him, and which is a very important observation we could make about Sriniketan, that though craft was not one of the focus, and Rabindranath wanted an entire change in the village economy, and he had not thought about the possibility of craft and art becoming this sort of focus of a new kind of economy possible in the villages. Gandhi also had a similar kind of experiment in his Nai Talim, but those of you who know, there's a fantastic essay actually by Shantidev Ghosh. I was fascinated by this. Shantidev says, he's actually critiquing Gandhi. He says that those of you who know about Nai Talim will recall that this was, its major aim was to make students pay for their own education. And they did that by craft. So, in Shantiniketan or even in Sriniketan, this was not a major focus. Students would be expected in the Sriniketan school, in Shikhashatra, but it was not mandatory that they earned. Yeah, in Nai Talim it was mandatory. Gandhi felt that this was one of the ways in which the village, especially the economy of the village, could change by also making children learn these crafts and work. Yeah, so kind of child labor, I would say. But so I just want to end and open this up for discussion by this one anecdote which Sudhir Babu talks about. I don't want my voice to be heard, yes, very clearly. So I think this is a fantastic it's a lovely anecdote actually. Sudhir Babu, who came, who was appointed by Elmhurst to come and work in Sriniketan, says that this was the last time that Gandhi came while Rabindranath was alive, and Gurudev was very anxious. So Sudhir Babu said, Gurudev, why are you worried? So he says, no, Gandhi is coming. And one of the questions that he might ask is why we don't have a charkha. You're doing so much about weaving, but you're not making your own thread. So, that's something that I'm worried about. I've written about this, that is, Rabindranath is saying, we've had a debate, but I still worry, each time he comes and visits Sriniketan. So, Sudhir Babu writes, Gandhi comes. He doesn't, of course, talk about the charkha. He just sort of looks at the wonderful work. He's particularly interested in the dairy, and then he sort of goes away. So he doesn't make any criticism of the fact that Sriniketan is not working from scratch. It's okay. No, but as long as they're doing this fantastic work. But this is a question that you've been sort of responding to by way of Gandhi's relationship to the Shantiniketan project. So his interest is in the ashram, but also primarily in Sriniketan. He wants, all the photo archives that we have show photographs of Gandhi in Sriniketan. I mean, apart from the standard ones where he is in Shantiniketan, most of them are in Sriniketan. So I think, therefore, we've looked at a wide spectrum, different but also linked, especially because linked also with students, ex-students, former students from Kalabhavan moving to work in Sriniketan. Sivakumar, for example, who talks about his first appointment there, and he stays on in Sriniketan for as long as he's here. And he talks about how he was given the charge of decorating a place for a particular event, and he was wondering what he was going to do. So Nandalal said, "Can you chhata achito? You can use the chhata and the kulo to create a new kind of design around the pond." So that's what is happening. So evolving with local material, thinking through and breaking barriers as much as possible. So barriers of questions of class, caste, masculine, feminine in art, in the idea of design, and borrowing from very eclectic. So borrowing, especially in Sriniketan, as you pointed out, a willingness to open up and borrow, because that's how you learn. Yes, so I'll stop here and we'll open this session to questions, observations limited to 2 lines, 2 sentences, but questions to Shraddha, you can go ahead. Yes. But the gala cut?
No. I have recently read the autobiography of Lokeshwar Singh, which is originally written in Esperanto, and now it is translated in Bengali. So and it seems that he has framed the curriculum of wood carving in Sriniketan. What exactly the role of Lokeshwar Singh?
Yeah, he went to Sweden and he was trained in the Sloyd system, and that is where he gets interested in Esperanto. So then later he becomes a master of Esperanto, translates Rabindranath into Esperanto and so on. But he was a very, sensitive and really resourceful craftsperson. In fact, somebody like Riten Majumdar learns quite a bit from him. So he was there, but later, of course, his interest shifts to a certain extent from design and crafts to Esperanto. So that happens. But so he is a very important person, but very little studied, partly because he shifted and then he went from Sriniketan to Vinay Bhavan. So that became his area where he worked. And also he started spending more and more time with his activities in relation to Esperanto, it spread and so on and so forth. But he was a very important figure in the early days. And to just add to what you were just saying, that the many people who from Shantiniketan, or rather Sriniketan, became part of the Nayitai, even wrote books for them. So many of those things, it was actually, there was a traffic between the Sriniketan and Gandhi's projects. And one of them also went from Kalabhavan, David Prasad, who went and taught there for a while. So there was this give and take, and Shurenkar was part of it. So many of these people from Shantiniketan, Sriniketan also contributed to Gandhi's project in a sense. And Gandhi probably looked at Sriniketan as an example, predating his own kind of thing, with similar thing. But the only thing, I wouldn't take it as child labor as the way you did, because part of the thing is that when you're learning a craft, if you just place it at that level of just doing manual labor, then of course it is child labor. But it is different from, say, using children to wash dishes in the wayside tea shop, because what happens is that you learn a skill, and that's the training for becoming a craftsperson or creative person later. So there is this difference, possibility, and also that is the, I mean, in a way, it can then lead them to do things. Even in Sriniketan, I mean, there are these two schools, if you think. Elmer's thought a little bit about earning. Rabindranath doesn't do that very much. But Elmer's was also toying with this idea a little bit, that they might be also be able to earn their keep, was there. So there were these two, I mean, debates went on in a certain way. But also learning a craft really is not exactly the same kind of labor as we see in other areas, like children working in a wayside, I mean, cycle repair shop, doing nothing, I mean, which is not adding to the skills, I mean, not adding to training of the hands in any way. But here there is something that is adding to oneself.
Well, actually, child labor was not my point. It's Shanti Dev Babu.
There is a little...
Yes, of course. No, I was just struck by the fact that he writes actually about this. There are references to Shashingo in the leave that he's being granted.
Yes.
The leaves that he's being granted. So I just know these, that leaves that he's been granted, and which allow him to go. So the lead story in Vishwavarti, in both Shantiniketan and Sriniketan, for learning is very interesting.
In fact, I mean, he is the one who goes and sends these Swedish videos.
Yes.
So the whole connection between Shantiniketan and Sriniketan opens up like that. So he goes there and sends the, I mean, looms, sends weavers, and similarly then Vishwavarti gives leave to others to go to Japan and study Japanese techniques of weaving. Somebody is also sent to England to study.
Kali Mohan Ghosh is granted leave at some point, I forget when, to go. So there are these schemes which already exist, that they're going to come back, and it's going to sort of enrich the institution where they're going from. Yes, any other question? I will talk to you, yes. Yes, Shubhalan.
The question is for both of you actually. I missed much of the conversation, sorry about that. I was wondering whether Shantiniketan's conception of the crafts challenged the conceptual difference between the national and the international. They were trying to rediscover and reinvent the traditional crafts. Some of these were rural crafts, but at the same time, they were trying to incorporate techniques from the other parts of the world. So, do you think that this was, in a way, very typical of Shantiniketan's worldview?
Vishwavarti's unique.
Yes.
Vishwavarti's worldview unique. I think much of this has been actually answered by Shikta, but if you would want to.
Yes, I mean, in a sense, what happens with that really, I mean, when you talk about Vishwavarti, there are a number of stages in which it works out. So Rabindranath himself initially thought, like you have discussed in your book as well, I mean, about Shantiniketan being this Eastern university where the cultures of the East come together. In fact, this was Nandalal's project, I mean, of bringing the East together in a sense. But Rabindranath moves away from there to also include the West. So he gets Stella Cranbridge and various other people. So other people, I mean, went ahead and brought the rest of the world as well. I mean, like all these, getting these Swedish weavers or German potters, and all these people started coming. So that was one of the possibilities. And one good thing about, I mean, Shantiniketan was there was no one perspective which everybody had to follow. So, like when we discussed Nandalal, we probably discussed Shantiniketan, Sriniketan, and all that. So if you get to Vinod Bihari, then you have to think about the rest of Shantiniketan. I mean, all that research that you said, the third factor in Vishwabharati. He was closely connected with that. He was drawing upon the research of Kirinovan Sen, Azadi Prasad Dwivedi and so on. So he was somebody through his close friend Mustafa Ali. I mean, he was always part of what was going on in the research section. Nandalal might not have been to the same extent, although he had friendships and things across. So you see that each one had a slightly different bent, and they would bring in these connections between different sections of Vishwabharati and the artist, as well as between different cultures of the East and the West. Ram Kinga would be more receptive to Western art. Rabindranath was more receptive to Western art. But Nandalal's ideologically sort of thought it is going to be the East. And the East meant quite a lot for him. It started in the Middle East with Persian painting, ended in Southeast Asia. So it was half the world still, you know. So he was not just looking at India, it's a wide range of things that he was looking at. But for other artists it went even beyond that, some of them. So all this could coexist and in a sense enrich the total atmosphere.
Right. So Rabindranath's project from the beginning is to include the West. The Oriental research, will not happen without Silva Levy and Vintonets and Stenkanova and others coming in. Sriniketan will not begin without Elmhurst. So though Rothindranath and Shantosh Majumdar are trained agriculturists. So, and Stella Krandish, of course, who comes to talk not about Oriental art, but about, as scholars have written, including Shivda, about Western art, the history of Western art. He feels a need to have students, and he writes, it's the first time that he gets to know about this, and that's the beginning of his interest. But yes, it is, thank you Shivda for pointing out that, the East occupies a major sort of part of Nandalal's imagination. But also this point that you raised that, India is actually part of what they call the Vishal Bharat program. So it's Kalidas Nag, Rabindranath, Shumiti Chattopadhyay in a major way, who are thinking about the Southeast Asia as part of the larger Hindu culture of India, which is sort of, which is there. But of course, it has taken on an entirely different life of its own. The demons also dance, he says. So, so he's bringing the puppets, for example, of Java, which he's seeing, the puppet plays that he has seen. So I think we're looking at something that is now, because it's not broken into these compartments, that we've forgotten how a kind of a vision of a larger, a map of a larger imagination actually operates. I think we're looking at the map of this imagination in both Shantiniketan and in Sriniketan. Do we have time? Anju? For one question?
What is the time?
Oh, what is the time? I don't know, my watch is like
6:30. No, I think we're out.
Okay, we're out of time. You can have a chat with Shivda after this, personally, but we'll have to bring this very interesting talk and discussion by Shivda to an end. And those of you who take an interest can look at the existing material. So.
And also read this book.
But
Can't promote my own book, but yes, it is apparently here.
We're just going to take a picture here.
May I request you kindly not to sort of speak so loudly? Hello. Okay. So thank you very much, and we're leaving the stage.